All right, good afternoon. My name is Bradley Jameson, and this is my recording for my final in Biology 185 called KHAT, the Silent Killer. First, I'd like to start out here with why I chose the drug KHAT for me. These are some pictures that I've taken throughout my time when I was traveling through the Horn of Africa, specifically in Ethiopia, an area called Dir Dawa. We'll just start across the top and make sure we roll through this real quick, but I think it's relevant if you understand why, when I first saw this drug, I was interested. So there's just a picture of the top left there of the screen. You can see me flying in with the plane engine there in the background. And then the next picture, if you see that straw hut you see there, that is actually, as our guys were giving us a tour through the town on our way to our camp where my Seabees were staying, they said, that's the local drug dealer hut. And I said, what does he deal? They said, KHAT. Hadn't even done I should have done the country up brief before going. I had forgot to read that part of the brief. Obviously, I had no idea what KHAT was. So at that point, it piqued my interest. The next picture you see after that, there is a bunch of people sitting around in almost a village square. It's a corner of a street, which the villages are so small there, people congregate everywhere, but it's hard to tell in that picture. But almost every one of those people have KHAT and are chewing KHAT while they're sitting around talking and working and preparing for the evening. Next, we'll skip down to the bottom where you see myself in my camouflage there and some others that are looking at the ground and dirt. So my job as an engineer was to go in, and we were building a school in this area, and we had to clear a bunch of KHAT that was in the ground out in order to build the school, which a local government requested. Well, that upset another faction of the government because it was an election year, and that was crops that they had not given us permission to take down, but we have been given permission by a different part of the government. So we had to go in and assess the soil to make sure if they were to replant, did we leave any trace chemicals, anything else behind that would make it unable to grow KHAT. And one more time. And behind all that actually is coffee, because the main export of Dir Dawa is actually coffee and coffee beans. So the next picture you see there, those burlap sacks that are with the white sheathing around them, that is just pounds and pounds of coffee. And inside that warehouse there were a whole bunch of women sitting around with piles of coffee beans in front of them. Their job was to pick out different grades of coffee beans and then put them in different piles. And I noticed in the corner, the next picture over you see there, there was some burlap sacks with these leaves sitting on it. And I asked my guys, hey, what is this? They said, that's the stuff. That's the KHAT. So you can see there, the KHAT on the burlap sacks there is literally, it's about half gone. It looks like somebody's been chewing on it throughout the day to keep themselves up and going and working through their day. That was my first experience with it there. From here, we'll move on. So, where do you find KHAT, right? We're going to go to find it. Obviously, I already told you I was in the Horn of Africa in Ethiopia, and that was where I first experienced it. But you can find it all over the Middle East. You can find it in Yemen, the Arabian Peninsula, Kenya, Ethiopia. Increasingly so in the UK. They're having some big issues right now in the UK because their import-export laws are different than ours, and they have a lot more African immigrants coming over that are bringing this stuff over by the truckload. Even though it's illegal, it's still becoming a bigger export-import from Ethiopia to the UK, becoming an issue. And then lastly, the US itself. There are places you can find KHAT in the US, but it's going to be underground cafes and underground markets across the U.S., mainly in large port cities where it can be snuck in, but it's very hard to import-export, especially with the distance from the U.S. to where it is legally grown, which is why you don't see a lot of it here. All right, so what's it look like? What it looks like, exactly what we kind of talked about, is arrowhead-shaped leaves sold in bundles. As you can see there, the trees grow, or the plants, the shrubs, grow anywhere from 3 to 15 feet tall. The ones you see there obviously are the smaller of the plant variety. And below those bundles that you see, and you can see how much is in that one bundle compared to the picture I showed you before that I had taken of some that were sitting around in the coffee area. They were separating coffee beans. What the difference is between the size of that bundle, what they've taken already, and what's left in that bundle, right? So that's what it looks like if you were to see it out in the street. It looks like something you'd probably pick up in a nursery if you didn't know what you were looking for. Its history actually is pretty interesting. It goes a lot further back than I thought it was going to go back. I'm used to drugs that were in the modern age, something from the 80s, 70s, 60s, uppers, downers, ludes, all this stuff, crazy stuff, right? To me, is made in a lab somewhere and wasn't that old. They've traced this back all the way back to the 13th century, where the Arab settlers would go across, and as they were traveling across the deserts, they would take this khat plant with them in order to, one, keep their stamina up as they were moving and going across the land, and two, they would boil it in coffees and teas along with other coffee beans and tea on its own in order to have it as a stimulant and a conversation piece as they were traveling across the land. It's been cultivated along with it for lots and many, many thousands of years, it looks like. They've been cultivating khat alongside coffee all the way from Africa to the Middle East. And usually, because it's so darn hot in most of the areas where this stuff is grown, it's used just to take the edge off a little bit, to kind of cool the brain, is what they call it. So current day, it's unfortunately become a drug that's quickly becoming a threat to health, not only in Africa and throughout the Middle East, but even more so in the UK here, growingly by the day. Cultural use. This was the interesting part. Like I said, when I experienced a little bit of run-in with some of the government with us destroying some of their khat plants, there was an election period going on throughout that timeline. So there was all sorts of interesting things that had to do or linked to khat. But khat traditionally is used was initially by physicians to deal with people that were having stress, or the physicians deal with people who are depressed. What's interesting though is that it was actually really even when I was there, it was given to the populace, sometimes by the government, and made available basically to make them complacent. Because life can be a little bit of a downer in some of those areas, this would give them the opportunity to sit around, and it would stimulate conversation amongst the men. This is something primarily men take. There are some women that do partake in khat, but it's not as widely used for women. To get them past the long, hot days of the desert. And even today, though, it's just a social lubricant that men use to sit around, and they will start in the early afternoon, typically when it gets super, super hot, and they will continue a session of khat chewing all the way through into the evening hours. So they can sit there and they talk about everything from politics to nature to the life to khat to everything else, but culturally, it is definitely a big deal in parts of the world that we discussed in order to be used as social lubricant and becoming a problem amongst some of the population. The economic impact. What does that mean? So obviously economy has a lot to do with any type of production and sale of any type of drug, depending on where you are, right? But here specifically, it's very interesting to find that in Ethiopia and Yemen, if you were to go through, and it is the second largest cash crop from these countries. And that's a big deal. When you think about it, it almost makes a quarter of their country's GDP, gross domestic product, which is a very big deal. Nowhere else in the world have I experienced a place where they rely so heavily on not necessarily an agricultural import, but an agricultural import-export that is specifically a drug product. It's estimated over a third of the average family's income in those areas are purchased by the males of the household. They purchase khat, and it becomes a problem amongst families as well because the men are spending a lot of their money on this khat because they have to have it, they need it, they want to have that social interaction, and they spend all their family's money overfeeding them at times, unfortunately. Khat's also the center of a large debate about the lack of productive man hours. Like I said, they start at like 1 in the afternoon, and they can go all the way to 3, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They sit around chewing khat, and that's the primary part of a workday that an employer wants their employees to be at work. So it's been a trend lately over the last 10 years that apparently is becoming a discussion at the government level of khat's effect on the productive man hours across the populace, and the men just at sometimes not even returning to work after sitting and having a good chew on khat for a while. Government use, like I talked about, the government actually is involved in the purchase, the sale, and the delivery of khat. It has been reported that there are campaigns that were taking and using khat in their campaign slogans, and they were even handing out khat at the polling and voting stations as motivators to get others to vote for them during election seasons and election years, right? And it's kept to keep the poor masses complacent, like I said. The debate that is stimulated, especially if you were to say given some KHAT by a government official, you're probably going to be for that person and happy that they gave you the KHAT. So you may convince others during your discussion, hey, come with this guy. He's good to go. He's been giving out KHAT. Vote for him, right? So if that's not voter intimidation, I don't know what is. And unfortunately, in some of these countries, it can get pretty ugly. But what that's done is a government has now become the cause of some communal health issues, and they are not at this moment taking large ownership of how to help people get off the KHAT or to help them with their economic situation after they become addicted to it. All right, DEA scheduling. So the Drug Enforcement Agency calls KHAT both a Class 1 and a Class 4 drug. That's because it also, in KHAT, has cathinone and caffeine. As you can see there, the chemical construct of that is similar to that of amphetamines, and it is a high similar to cocaine, which we'll talk about a little later. But KHAT currently has no accepted medical use and treatment in the United States anyway. And it's, if you were to get caught with it, pardon me, in the United States, you can face for a Schedule 1 possession up to 20 years in prison and to $1 million in fines. So that can be significant, obviously, and run somebody's day pretty bad. Or a Schedule 4, which can be up to 3 years and $250,000. I don't know how. I wasn't able to find out if they can charge you with both of those if you get caught with it, because it is labeled both by the DEA. But that is something I will maybe find out in the future. All right, the fun stuff. Here we go. This is what we're all here for, right? The mechanism of action of KHAT is very similar and almost identical to that of amphetamines. That's why I'm using the mechanism of action you see here for the amphetamines. So, like I said, KHAT is made up of cathinone and caffeine. And they're two very distinctly different drugs, but they have similar effects on the synapse. And we're going to talk through that as we go through. So when KHAT enters the presynaptic cell, as you can see here, which normally is something done by, as we're going through, would be done by different entities, right? KHAT enters right in, just like calcium would normally, right, to come in and stimulate what we call vesicles. Now, these vesicles are what are holding all of your, the vesicles were holding all of your monoamines and all of your different type of stimulants like dopamine, epinephrine, serotonin, and what it's doing is coming in, it's tricking the vesicles to basically trade places with, it'll go into the vesicle and out will kick, primarily what it'll kick out is a dopamine, but it'll kick out the dopamine, the neurotransmitters will get released. At that point in time, it's at this right in the presynaptic cell, it's tricked those vesicles into what we call exocytosis. So now they are sending out all of their neurotransmitters. They're coming down, they're bonding with the cell walls, they're coming out, and they're entering in the synaptic cleft. Now, what the tricky part of what they do here with KHAT as well, just like amphetamines, is that not only does it excite the release of our neurotransmitters, at the same time, it actually is blocking the reuptake transporters, not allowing, at that point, the dopamine and other neurotransmitters, which are also released with the use of KHAT, but primarily dopamine, like I said. It's preventing them, at this point, from being reuptook back into the system and recycled. So all that leaves is for them to sit there and constantly bind over and over and over again with dopamine receptors. And when that happens and your dopamine receptors are constantly being flooded, is now you have a perpetuance of a lot of dopamine within a synaptic cleft, which is causing that euphoric, high feeling, which is what people are going for when they take this drug, right? But it basically hoodwinked the vesicles and tricked by blocking the reuptake transporters into allowing it to release all of its reuptake inhibitors. All of its neurotransmitters, which is pretty interesting. And when it does this, that's what gives you the high feeling, right? And as you can see in the graphic here, with your presynaptic cells and the postsynaptic, where they are just binding over and over and over again and flooding those terminals. But it's very interesting because it's not like some drugs where it's just in and out, and it does both things. It also is an exciter, and it is actually plugging up the reuptake transporters, which can cause problems, obviously, for people and their health and how long the high lasts, right? How's it taken? It's affecting the body. KHAT is taken primarily orally, meaning they chew on it. And you can see here in the graphics, they're chewing on it, which means it has to pass through their digestive system, which means this drug is also susceptible to the first pass effect. Something we learned in class, which is first pass effect. Anything taken orally is going to be degraded just virtually, but it has to go through your entire intestinal tract and through to your liver in order to be metabolized. And by doing that, unlike taking something intravenously or whatever else, you are now taking up a lot of what you take, meaning you have to take more of it because it takes and you lose a lot of what would get in your bloodstream. Those chemicals are not able to get in there. So it's susceptible to what we call the first pass effect, meaning it's not going to be 100% of what you take in reaching your bloodstream. They also can use it in tea, and they can also put it and sprinkle on food as well, depending on how they feel like taking it that day, I guess. The high itself is a euphoria feeling, very self-confident driving. It makes you feel better, increase in physical strength. People use it during their workday in order to keep them going throughout the day to do physical labor. Hyper alertness, which can lead them to at some point have anxiety, which was also going to lead to at some point some insomnia, which we'll talk about a little bit later, why insomnia is so important to this drug. And it's a high that can last anywhere from 3 to 8 hours, depending on your frequency of use. Like I said, if you're chewing it all day, continuously intaking it, it becomes hard to judge how long your high will last based off the last time that you took it, but an average 3 to 8 hours depending on it. Your body immediately increases your blood pressure, makes it really like hard and fast, makes you excited. It's excitatory, makes you want to go. It gets the heart pressure going straight up, and it causes insomnia in a lot of cases, and you're unable to sleep. The reason it does that is because it slows the reuptake of epinephrine, and it makes it at that point to where you have that sleepless and reckless night because you should be getting that sleep, but because it's slowing down the reuptake of the epinephrine in your body, you are unable to get to sleep just fast as you would if you weren't taking KHAT. And gastric disorders, which we're going to talk about primarily next as well. And it can cause chronic, excuse me, it can cause chronic constipation and physical exhaustion. There's a difference also between eating it fresh or eating it dry. When it's fresh, it's high in caffeine and cathinone, and when it dries out, it becomes much less effective because the caffeine at that point is reduced drastically. So people that sell and buy it are very concerned with how they transport it across long distances, whether it be refrigerated, wrapped in banana leaves, some way that when it gets where it's going, it gets there as fresh as possible. Now, let's talk about the gastrointestinal system. So a normal gastrointestinal system that you and I both have is like this, right? So you're going to intake your food. Saliva is going to help you lubricate it, break down those foods, and you're then going to shove it down your esophagus, which is a soft, lean muscle that's going to push it down through into your stomach. When it gets in your stomach, you're going to have a mucus-lined stomach wall that is going to, at that point, continue to break down whatever it is you've put into your system, whether it be food, and typically for us healthy people, it's things like food and steak and chicken and salad and all sorts of good stuff, not KHAT. At that point, from the stomach through the duodenum as it passes through into your gut, and then from there it's going to go out to your liver to be metabolized, and then also through to your kidneys as well. At that point, you're going to have all of these things pushing through. Your small intestines at that point, their job is to continue to break down those fats and those carbohydrates and those proteins that you have and turn them into a waste product as it moves through your small and large intestines all the way to your colon or to your kidneys, which will at that point go to your urinary tract, or at the point when it reaches your rectum through your colon. Obviously, that is when you are using the bathroom and you're actually going to have to go and defecate, right? So that is a normal system. It's healthy. It works on average when we eat, depending on who you are and how your metabolism works. You're seeing food that you eat, within a few hours at times passing through your system, if not over the next day and sometimes days, depending on how hard it was your system had to work. But the point is, because you don't have a whole lot of issues from extended KHAT use, your healthy intestinal tract is working normally as it should, and a lot of this is through, the peripheral nervous system, which is making sure all the things in the background are happening all the time, like your digestion as you're moving through. Everything is working on its own in the PNS because it is making those things happen. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. And you are at that point in time moving through life and hopefully healthy, right? So, however, if you were to have prolonged KHAT use and this system, which is hugely important because let's be honest, everyone has to eat, you have to drink water, you have to process these things. So your intestinal GI tract is hugely important to you as a human being, right? So KHAT's affecting your intestinal tract. Gastritis, inflammation of the mucous membrane. Remember we talked about the lining of your stomach being lined with mucus. It's going to inflame that membrane and make it much harder for your body to actually break down not just the KHAT as it's going through, but all of the other things like the food or whatever else you have going through your body. And it's going to make it extremely difficult for that. And antacids have been shown to be helpful for that in order to get the stomach back into a calm state for those extreme KHAT users, but not always. Constipation. Hey, let's be honest, nobody likes to be constipated, right? It's a horrible feeling. But it is a strain, right? It's something that can actually kill you. So if you didn't know that, yeah, if you cannot relieve yourself, you could die. It is very possible that you could poison your body, / the effort it takes as you strain to push out and to defecate that you put in your body has been known to cause heart arrhythmia and even death in some cases because you try so hard to pass this dry stool that you have stuck in your system because you're so constipated. And the reason it makes you constipated is because it's sucking up and messing with all of this mucous membranes inside of your intestinal tracts, which means you're basically, instead of passing your food through and down a nice lubricated hallway, instead it's coming up against a dry, hard surface and having to make its way through, and it just backs up and packs itself in to where you can at some point have an impacted colon if not taken care of. Hemorrhoids are another huge thing that's been noticed with these. Hemorrhoids are apparently not fun. They are painful. It's a mass of swelling tissue inside your anal canal that can lead to bleeding and all sorts of things which are not healthy and can hurt the body, right? So your stomach and intestinal cancers are another big part of this, right? You can get cancer throughout any part of your life and in many different ways, as we all know. But cancer can be one of the worst things that happen in someone's life. And why would you want to perpetuate something you don't have to by just stop taking KHAT or don't use KHAT or any other drugs for that matter because it's not going to be healthy for your system and it could cause cancer in many cases. And we don't know why cancer is what it is and why it does what it does. It just simply is, and we know that it's a huge issue amongst our society, and KHAT is known to be something that spurs cancer even further. All right, another quick one we'll talk about is the healthy, happy mouth, right? A huge part of how we use our intestinal system is because we have to get that food to where it goes, and we have to masticate it, chew it, and get it down. So a quick look at a healthy, happy mouth, right? You have your pink gums. Your teeth are looking, well, they don't have to be white necessarily, but you don't want them to be black or brown, and they should be intact. They should have proper spacing. So the way you can do that is check your teeth. Make sure you have the proper strength and condition of your teeth. Make sure you have a good, decent breath. And if you know throughout all the time you have bad breath, that can be a sign of some gingivitis or gum disease, which cannot be healthy. But a happy, healthy mouth will have predominantly not bad breath unless you ate a whole bunch of garlic or whatever else, right? And proper jaw alignment and tooth spacing. So by that, what you do is you bear your bite. So make sure that when you're looking at it, you put your feet together, your teeth aren't crowded, your teeth don't look crooked, everything else is clean and you're disease-free, hopefully, with any luck. And check your tongue. So the tongue should look pink, and it should be moist and not have a lot of white speckling or anything else that is bumpy throughout your mouth. So keep that mouth healthy. This is what a healthy mouth looks like for someone who has not been partaking in KHAT. And then we move forward, you will see this is what it looks like if you are chewing KHAT. So you can see you have a huge, beautiful and sexy giant chaw on the side of your mouth there, full of green loveliness. He has some wonderful teeth, as you can see there. He's actually not too far along with some of the tooth decay, but you will know someone is doing a lot of KHAT if you see like those brown teeth we have here on the screen as well down below. It stains the teeth very quickly, very fast, and causes all sorts of problems, from your brown staining, discoloration, from cracks, all the way from your root down to the base of your tooth, cavities, gum disease, dental abscesses. If you've ever had a dental abscess, they are beyond painful and horrible. And then last but not least, oral cancer, which could cause you to, let's say, lose your jaw, lose your tongue, lose a part of your digestive system that you need in order to live, because you decided you wanted to go out and do KHAT, right? KHAT is not good for the body in any way, shape, or form, specifically your gastrointestinal tracts and your mouth and thereof. So with that, the last thing we'll talk about is while you're out there on the streets and you're running around and you happen to hear somebody say, hey man, you got any chat? You got any oat? You have any Bushman's tea or African salad? Maybe some Abyssinian tea or some tohai? All of those things are KHAT. They're just different names for it. These are some of the street names to keep your ears out for when you're out there running around, and you never know if you come across. And if you do, it's your choice what you should do. But in today's society, see something, say something. We don't have any room in America for any more fanciful, crazy drugs. We do not need KHAT in America. We'll keep it out, thankfully, and hopefully, and we can move from there. So, in the end, don't do drugs. Specifically, please don't do KHAT. It is a killer, and it is something that has been hurting other societies outside of America for a long, long time, and hopefully we can avoid. Other than that, that concludes my my presentation for today. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.